The government is under fire for doing a trade deal with Beijing ahead of yesterday's meeting of the foreign ministers of the two countries. Donald Trump tees off on Kevin Rudd, and Spotify claims a record number of millionaires thanks to music streaming. Welcome to Fear and Greed Business News, daily business news for people who make their own decisions. It is Thursday, the 21st of March, 2024. I'm Michael Thompson, and good morning, Sean Aylmer.
Good morning, Michael.
Sean, after the show today, you have an interview coming up with Dr. Nicola Powell, who is the head of research and economics at Domain.
Yes, Nicola and the team at Domain have gone off, crunched the numbers and looked at house prices in terms of per square metre and some really interesting findings about perhaps how we can make housing more affordable. Well worth a listen. I'll tell you, there's a great story about it later in the show, but then it's worth hanging on to listen to Nicola to hear her take on how maybe we can just make housing just a little bit more accessible for more people.
Yeah, it is a good chat. It is coming up after the show. The main story, though, this morning, Sean, the meeting of Foreign Minister Penny Wong and her Chinese counterpart Wang Yi has come under fire over claims of quid pro quo deals in trade.
The two met yesterday morning after Australia had dropped restrictions on Chinese-made wind turbines, something Senator Wong said had nothing to do with Canberra's push to allow Australian wine back into the Chinese market without huge tariffs. Maybe, but Chinese media said it was a good gesture ahead of yesterday's talks. The discussion between the two foreign ministers included Australia's concerns about human rights violations in the region and unsafe conduct at sea. Senator Wong said she also told Mr. Wang that Australians were shocked by the suspended death sentence handed to jailed Chinese-Australian academic Yang Hengjun, and that the government will continue to advocate on his behalf. Senator Wong said that the two countries want to engage and cooperate where they can, knowing that they will sometimes disagree. Now, ahead of the meeting, Mr. Wong said it was important both sides stay committed to mutual respect.
Oh, it is such an extraordinary kind of exercise in diplomacy, this kind of thing, isn't it?
Fascinating to watch.
Where all of the language is so loaded. Really, isn't it? And like there would be going to such lengths to ensure there is no offence caused on either side, and every side is kind of playing a long game here.
Yeah, definitely. And I think they want a normalisation of relations. Both sides want China and Australia to be solid trading partners, but the geopolitics of it is so touchy.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And then, of course, then you had Senator Wong all but confirming that the number two person in Beijing after Xi Jinping, Premier Li Qiang, will visit Australia later in the year.
It would certainly demonstrate the improved relations between the two countries. Maybe the lobster and beef farmers will win a breakthrough in their trade stalemate if Mr. Li turns up. Mr. Wang yesterday was due to meet Australian CEOs for lunch and then the Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. Today he's scheduled to visit with former Prime Minister Paul Keating in what I reckon would be the most interesting meeting to attend. If I had to pick one, I reckon that'd be the one to attend. Meanwhile, Michael, the Financial Review is reporting that the US Deputy Secretary of State, Kurt Campbell, has admitted more efforts needed from Washington to reassure Australia and the UK on the progress of AUKUS.
All right, plenty going on in that space. How did local markets perform yesterday?
The S&P ASX 200 closed down just a touch to 7,696 points. You said, Michael, plenty going on in politics. Actually, wasn't a lot going on in markets, or at least not in the Australian equities market. Of course, that's following from the Reserve Bank's rate meeting on Tuesday and the US interest rate deliberations overnight. Energy stocks yesterday did best on the back of higher oil prices, while utilities and tech stocks were sold off. But I wouldn't want to overstate the movements. Not much happened, really. Banks were lower, the big miners higher, the retailers were mixed. One standout was REA Group, which jumped nearly 5%. Woolies was the worst of the large caps, down more than 1%. I've really broken the golden rule. You know, when nothing's happening, you can't say nothing's happening.
No, you're supposed to hype it up.
Guess what? REA share price, unbelievable, jumped nearly 5%. Wow.
So there are some lessons here from the weekend edition of Fear and Greed. And what I've started doing, and particularly as soon as I need to make something sound bigger than it was, I just refer to it as being kind of seismic.
It was a seismic quiet day yesterday.
I don't think that works, Sean.
There was some corporate news, though. Mining giant South32, its share price fell 4% after withdrawing its Australian manganese output guidance. due to significant damage caused by Cyclone Megan at the Groote Eylandt port in the Northern Territory. Now, that weather system has been downgraded to a tropical low. It's expected to bring heavy rainfall and possible flooding in the territory. Also, Rio Tinto said it will invest $535 million in its Rincon lithium plant in Argentina as it works to begin production by the end of the year.
Okay, so a little bit quiet on local markets. What about international markets?
So much excitement, Michael. Seismic excitement. Global equities. A survey of global fund managers by Bank of America found that they are more bullish than they've been at any time over the past couple of years. The survey says fundies think the risk of a global recession is receding. The most popular traded is still the Magnificent 7 US stocks, notwithstanding all the commentary recently that they might have had their day. Now, fundies are also relatively keen on Japanese equities, relatively keen on Bitcoin, and relatively keen on cash. Basically, that means having a stack of cash ready to spend when the opportunities come up. They're not overly confident on Chinese equities. Oil prices are up again, hitting multi-month highs, so they did come off a bit yesterday afternoon. Basically, traders are still assessing how recent Ukrainian attacks on Russian refineries will affect global supplies. Iron ore prices have continued to rise after dipping below $100 a tonne a few days ago. They're now back to around $107 a tonne mark, and that has supported Australia's big miners. Not a lot happening in the Aussie dollar, so I'm not going to mention it.
Oh, really? Never. Really? I mean, you can't tease us like that and to say it's nothing much is happening. Now you have to tell us what it is.
65.3 US cents.
Oh, you're right. That was dull. I don't know if I'm the only person that thought this, Sean, but when you were talking about that survey by Bank of America, and you said the survey says fundies think the risk. I can't remember what else you said, but did anyone else get kind of Family Feud flashbacks when you did that? Remember that? Remember that?
Yeah,
and they'd lock in all of their answers, and then they'd go to the survey that they've done of the live studio audience. And like, the survey says, bum bum. Yeah. I'm trying to remember who hosted Family Feud.
Well, it was always Tony
Barber. He
hosted every game show ever made in Australia, as far as I'm concerned.
So if you're not sure who hosted a game show, just go Tony Barber and you've got probably about a 90% chance of being right.
Yeah.
All right. I'm going to have to Google it. I will do that in a little bit. I shouldn't get distracted, and I'm not going to send us off on a tangent any more than I already have. We'll be back in a moment with the rest of the day's business news. Sean, Republican candidate for the upcoming presidential election, Donald Trump, has blasted former Prime Minister and Australia's top diplomat in the US, Kevin Rudd, calling him nasty and saying you won't be in the job for long.
In an interview with former British right-wing politician Nigel Farage, Trump says of Rudd, and I quote, "I don't know much about him. I heard he was a little bit nasty." End quote. He then went on, quoting again, "I hear he is not the brightest bulb. If he's at all hostile, he won't be there for long." End quote. The US president can revoke an ambassador's credentials, rendering them powerless in Washington. So, of course, if Trump wins the November poll, then he has the ability to do that. Just doesn't seem to be a factor in many of these conversations. He's almost assuming he will win. There's a bit of history between the two. Rudd has previously called Trump the most destructive president in history and nuts. Later yesterday, the Prime Minister was scrambling to defend Mr. Rudd, who he appointed, saying he'd be able to work with Donald Trump if he was successful. Australia's ambassador to the US under Malcolm Turnbull and then Scott Morrison during the Trump years was former Federal Treasurer Joe Hockey. Generally, he's considered to have done a pretty good job in very, very difficult circumstances, especially when the Trump White House wanted to put tariffs on steel and aluminium imports. We seem to get through that one. Anyway, Donald Trump isn't a fan of Kevin Rudd.
Superfund returns. Sean, we're up for the fourth consecutive month in February, with the median growth fund delivering 1.9% over the period, taking the 4-month return to 9%.
That's big. Imagine if that kept going, the annual return would be 27%.
Wow.
A better way to think about it is how your super fund has gone in the first 8 months of the financial year. Well, according to Chant West, the median growth fund is up 6.7%. The success in February reflects international share markets and ongoing resilience in the US economy. Australian shares were also high, but not by as much as some other markets. Now, growth funds have, on average, about 55% invested in shares, meaning there's 45% in other assets.
Sean, we mentioned this at the top of the show. One way to make housing in Australia more affordable is to up the density of homes across the nation, particularly in the capital cities.
That's the finding from the Domain Price Per Square Metre report for 2024. Domain's latest data shows that house prices per square metre and unit prices per square metre in capital cities have been trending upwards over the past 1 year and 5 years, driven by higher prices and smaller floor or land sizes. There's been a shrinking of land sizes due to densification and rising land premiums. What that does is create more opportunity for home ownership because high density translates to increased affordability. While Sydney and Melbourne have the highest price per square metre, the strongest growth over the past 5 years in houses has come from Brisbane, Adelaide and Hobart. Perth's had the strongest growth over the past year. In terms of units, prices per square metre in Sydney and Melbourne over the past 5 years have been flat, while they've been between 10 and 47% higher in the other capital cities.
Yeah, well worth a listen to the interview after the show with Dr. Nicola Powell about that one. Now, Amcor boss Ron Delia is leaving the world's largest consumer packaging group after 9 years as CEO for health reasons.
The announcement that the 52-year-old was leaving sent Amcor's share price down 3%. Amcor operates 210 packaging factories in 43 countries. It produces bottles and plastic pouches, wraps, containers, that type of stuff. Recently, the company said it will cut jobs and close some plants in response to weaker consumer demand. We hope Mr. Delhi is okay.
National Australia Bank and its former UK subsidiary Clydesdale Bank have won a long-running British courtroom battle, heading off a potential class action that could have put them on the hook for hundreds of millions of dollars.
The two banks were being sued by 4 British small businesses who alleged they had been missold fixed-rate business loans and were seeking more than £12 million in costs, according to a report in the Financial Review. Clydesdale Bank, now Virgin Money, was accused of misselling hundreds of business loans when owned by NAB. If the claimants had won the 3-month trial, which took place at the end of last year, that would have opened the door for hundreds of other former SME customers. The judgment comes at an opportune moment for Virgin Money, whose board has just endorsed a £2.9 billion takeover from Britain's largest building society. That building society is called Nationwide.
All right, turning to international news, and Reddit Inc. lists on the New York Stock Exchange tonight, and its fate will rest in part in the hands of its users, of course, Sean, known as Redditors.
Yes, that's because the company has reserved about 8% of its long-awaited public offering for its most prolific users, including volunteer moderators who help tame the platform. Their shares won't be subject to a lockup, meaning the owners can sell them on the opening day of trading, according to a story on Bloomberg. The company is seeking to raise as much as $748 million. It will begin trading tonight. Now, the novel share plan to give users shares is not without risk. Plenty of Redditors have been combative with the site, launching revolts over everything from racism on the platform through to executives' staffing decisions. Going to be fun to watch, that one.
Now, how about this one? Bentley, the car manufacturer, has reported its second largest annual profit as almost 3/4 of buyers splurge on custom features like wood trim and bespoke paint jobs. What cost of living crisis, Sean?
Exactly. 7 out of 10 Bentley buyers last year paid for personalised features worth in excess of £40,000.
I love the fact that even just the personalised features cost more than any car I could afford to buy.
Yes. Now, several commissioned so many custom add-ons that it actually doubled the price of their cars. Now, Bentleys are expensive. In Australia, they're kind of between $400,000 and $500,000. So these custom add-ons doubled the price of some of the cars, and this is in Europe. One customer requested wood from his own forest be used in the interior. Yeah, you got to wonder. While another put £400,000 worth of carbon fibre onto the vehicle, according to a report in the Financial Times, as you do. In fact, the chief executive, Adrian Hallmark, said the levels of customer spend was jaw-dropping. That's from the boss of this company. There are some buyers who are actively engaged in actually creating one-off cars. Demand for bespoke cars helped offset a major drop in demand from China in the first half of the year for Bentley. Now, its operating profit was actually lower than the previous year. But that previous year, there was a big backlog of orders, and that was its record year. So in a more normal year, it has had its second best year ever, all on the back of these custom features. It also came out and pushed back its timeline for its first electric vehicle.
Whatever happened to just hanging a pair of fluffy dice or something? If you want to customize your vehicle.
Whenever I think of like wood-panelled cars, I think of Vacation and Chevy Chase.
Oh, yes. Getting stuck under the log truck at the start of the Christmas vacation. Yes. Yeah. Oh,
we've got a real TV theme here today.
Oh, we have, haven't we? It's great. I mean, for an audio medium, it's great to be discussing so much TV, isn't it? Finally, let's get back on the audio track with this last one, Sean. Spotify has released its annual Loud and Clear report, and it shows that 329,000 songs were each streamed at least 1 million times in 2023.
Yes, streaming has come a long way. Spotify has 600 million users worldwide, resulting in trillions of streams. The report says that 80% of the 1,250 artists generating at least $1 million on Spotify, a figure that's tripled since 2017, are not household names and did not feature a hit in Spotify's top 50 global chart. Last year, Spotify paid about $9 billion to the music industry, and that figure has tripled over the past 6 years. The number of artists generating at least $1 million or $100,000 or $10,000 has also tripled in that period. And the number of independent artists, that's do-it-yourself or signed with independent labels, has soared. And independent artists received more than half of Spotify's payments last year. And finally, one for you, Michael, as a rule of thumb, artists are heading towards $1 million per year in revenue if they've got about 4 to 5 million monthly listeners or 20 to 25 million monthly streams.
Is that all?
There's your goal. Yep.
All right. First, I need to become a musician, and then I need to get 20 to 25 million streams. Easy.
Good point. Good point.
All right. Up next is the Fear and Greed Daily Interview. You're speaking today with Dr. Nicola Powell, Head of Research at Domain.
Yeah, all about density of housing and just a different way of looking at solving, or maybe not solving, but at least biting into the housing crisis that's going on at the moment.
Yeah, it is a really interesting conversation because it does get into that almost political side of is density, greater density, the way we should be going, and really who wants that happening in their backyard kind of thing. So it's one of those ones that does stir up a lot of opinion. So it's a really interesting conversation. You can find that up next in the Fear and Greed playlist on your podcast platform or at fearandgreed.com.au. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Michael.
It's Thursday, the 21st of March, 2024. Make sure you're following the podcast and join us online on LinkedIn, Instagram, X, TikTok, and Facebook. I'm Michael Thompson, and that was Fear and Greed Business News. Have a great day.